All right, May 14th, 2025. This is the IPS Morning Deprogram. I'm assuming the audio is good. And this is the backup channel. We're going to be here for the next couple of weeks. The main channel has been banned, shut down, locked down, quarantined. They've quarantined us because of hate speech, Disease X. See, the IPS main channel caught Disease X from Ye. Yadolf, Clan Ye, Yelium. He goes by Ye today. He put out this Hail H word thing. I guess I got to say H word now. Hail H word and N word. And basically, he's gone viral, but not really his content because they've pulled it. But people are remixing it and putting it on their own channels. In fact, there was this couple I was looking at who were playing it in their car, singing along with it. And then they were doxxed for racism. And now they're raising money on GoFundMe. So people are making money off of slurs. It's $1 million psyop. Look at the Shiloh Hendricks case. And in Shiloh Hendricks, okay, she made $750,000, but the victim, quote unquote, the 5-year-old, got $250,000 so far. So there's $1 million between them. I don't know if the predator on the playground got any money out of it. Not sure yet. The whole thing is questionable, but this Ye thing trickled back down to us because we did an episode of South Pole, the inaugural season 4, episode 1. And in it, Ye was on a leash with a balloon over his head with helium being walked by his wife. And it's just comedy, it's satire. And he ran out of helium, so he goes off the chain and he puts on a swastika shirt and he starts hailing H word. And we did this this was a joke more than a month ago. But our satire is now hate speech because of the recent developments. And what happened is, I guess YouTube sent their bots to go crawl. They went through my collection of videos, and we got more than 300 videos on the channel. We have one little cartoon, and I got a strike for hate speech. They said no live streaming, no monetization, did not pass go, did not collect 200. It's just like, to me, it's just a major overreaction on their part to a cartoon. But it's not the first time that our South Poles have been censored. South Pole was originally censored because we were mocking January 6th. So it seems to be something about cartoons. Maybe the sensitivity here is that I can say the truth. I can say all kinds of stuff here that they don't want people to think. But if I put it in a cartoon, I think the virality goes up. They recognize the power of the cartoon to Trojan horse. And speaking of Trojan horses, this is what we're doing with the PSYOP cards, the PSYOP trading cards. I've been working on that, and others have sent me some designs, and we're at the point where we're ready to print. So we have a couple of options moving forward, and I'll detail this in the next newsletter today. But if we can get, let's just say 30 people or 33 people to pre-order, because it takes like a month to come in, or maybe a little less from the time that I order, print, get it here, and then ship. I'll get the timelines, but if we can get about 30 people to pre-order, I can get a sufficient volume to get entire decks created and then have inventory. We've got the designs, and I've been looking into, well, I've been using ChatGPT to mirror the Illuminati card game, which interestingly is based on Robert Anton Wilson's work, which I didn't realize. And Wilson's work is hugely influential, especially if you look at the Jim Carrey number 23 Sirius connections, even the Truman Show, that's Sirius Dog Star Falls. That's all from Robert Anton Wilson's work. And he inspired this card game. So I took that card game to ChatGPT and I try to ask, can you mirror this? And we have something. And the idea would be, instead of the Illuminati doing their plans, it's just each player, their cards, in other words, would have some kind of something, instead of like Magic the Gathering where it's magic, instead it'd be hoaxes and illusion, media psyops, crisis actor cards. The whole point of it is these are entertaining collectible cards. They're kind of funny, but they tell the truth. Sort of like the Insider tabloid. But we could go into print as early as next week. So I'm thinking I'll put the pre-order up, and then in 7 days, we'll see what we have, and then we'll place the orders then. But I've done the math, and it works. The cards would be two-sided, color, rounded corners. And if I sell them individually, I have plenty of, I've been selling art cards forever. I have the sleeves. so it's ready to go. Leo Friend says, I own the original Steven Jackson Illuminati card game, but I never played with anyone. I don't think I've even tried to learn the rules. Yeah, I don't know if anybody plays that except for the Illuminati. Isn't that what they were playing at Event 201, the tabletop exercise before they did 2020? But aside from them, who really plays it? It's just the idea is that, yeah, potentially you could. Auto Hoax Con, convention, everyone's playing this game. Probably it could happen. But the initial investors will get one of each card. So you spend 30, you get 30 cards. It's a great deal. And then I would be left here after the 30 sets are distributed with 20 complete sets, which I would probably sell as sets or possibly even some cards individually. But if you haven't been keeping up with the PSYOP trading cards, you'll be caught up tonight. Just make sure you sign up for the newsletter. All right, so let's go through what's happening right now. Let me share my screen. Okay, this is getting interesting, by the way. In a couple of days, we're going to be able to see Final Destination Bloodlines. So look at this from the trailer. As the Space Needle's blowing up, a penny crosses in front of it with Abraham Lincoln. And as Synchromorpheus has pointed out, this may have some connotations regarding Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny, the right-wing vigilante, corresponding to the left-wing Luigi. We're talking about vigilantes, class warfare, one from the bottom striking up, one from the top striking down. Interesting dynamic here. But the penny having Lincoln, which implies headshot, superimposed over a Space Needle with the explosion. And if you've been following this channel, we've been talking about the symbolism, the various ways in entertainment we have seen the nuke associated with Seattle and the correspondence between that and the Trump head wound. So it's all overlapping. Final Destination Bloodlines is one of the best movies of the year, says this person who apparently saw it. So it's going to be big, and it comes out in 2 days. A couple of other things. When we were talking about Seattle and the various drills the other day, we were talking about the earthquake scenario. They're doing earthquake drills. October 16th at 10:16 a.m., earthquake drills. But this is not the first time they've done this. And part of this overall narrative, now again, we're just analyzing predictive programming and concurrent programming, which this would be. Final Destination is not predictive necessarily. I would call it concurrent if it's happening at the same time. Like last year, we had half a dozen movies with the Trump head wound symbolically represented, overtly in many cases. And we're observing the same phenomenon here. And among the body of symbols and scenarios, the earthquake has been a huge part of it. In fact, Jurassic Liars often references the meaning behind Cleveland, Cleveland, this constant refrain that refers to the fault line. So here you have, in the Space Needle, the floor cracking. And the Space Needle significance is analogous to the significance of the Twin Towers. If you look at 9/11 and the significance that PSYOP had globally, they change history. They write our history. And events like that steer it for decades. And the next 9/11, based on our analysis of predictive programming, seems to indicate the Space Needle as a major symbolic target, likely because of its, in my view, it's the Tower of Babel, the tower that goes to the heavens. It is a UFO consciously designed as such, an analogous symbol to the One World Trade Tower. These are all analogous symbols, but they can't knock that down. They already did 9/11 there. And the twins went down. 13 years later, on 11/3, they open the One World Trade Tower. Now, 11/3 has been significant because it's tied specifically to all of the predictive programming with Seattle getting nuked. In fact, in 2019, a lot of people were pointing out, what's with the 113 and Seattle nuke situation? So the fact that the One World Trade Tower opened on 11/3 and it's a follow-up to 9/11 is highly significant. In Bloodlines, Final Destination, you find out that the Space Needle prophecy of it being destroyed is actually the basis for the entire franchise. But the first movie came out right before 9/11 and it involved exploding planes. So there's a continuity here in the fictional universes in which predictive programming takes place. And in particular in this scene, and this is from the trailer, the floor is cracking. So you have an earthquake symbolically represented. So we have the earthquake, we have the exploding Space Needle, and we have the Lincoln reference, the head wound assassination reference. A couple of other things to mention here. So 6/11, every 3 seconds is when Trump was shot. 6/11, 2001, McVeigh executed at 33, as we often talk about. That date has a great deal of significance to all of this. So look how close we are. We're less than a month away from this date that has been associated with the next 9/11. And the number 6/11, again, it's just a flipped over 9/11, which to me connotes it represents something here. And I think what it kind of represents is, as 9/11 is the outside threat coming in, 6/11 is the domestic violent extremist threat they've been hyping up this whole time. But the fact that there's a trailer with Lincoln superimposed over the exploding Space Needle, you know how often we've seen this pairing, the head wound nuke? In fact, Trump shot in Butler, 42 miles away, East Palestine, Ohio, with the mushroom cloud. And that was designated the 42 most significant miles, that stretch of land leading up to the election. These things have been correlated very strongly. So this is, again, just affirming it. And now we're adding in earthquakes. And I mentioned the earthquake symbolism in Stranger Things, where season 4 finale has the crack opening up all across Hawkins, which I think represents Seattle. Ground opens up, you got fallout. Thunderbolts. In fact, the main character in Thunderbolts is from Stranger Things. Earns $33 million. I should have asked you guys, how much money did they make on their second domestic weekend? Specific incidents, there's a couple of other things here. I didn't know this, but on New Year's Eve, 1999, there was a celebration at the Space Needle that was canceled due to terrorist threats. So they had 2 years to plan for their 2000 New Year's Eve celebration at the Space Needle, and they canceled it because of terrorist threats. It says the cancellation was driven by the arrest of Ahmed Rassam, a terrorist involved in a foiled Millennium bomb plot targeting LAX. He was apprehended, and it says here his primary target was Los Angeles, but he had a hotel near Seattle Center, and they had a clue here that he was going to go after landmarks like the Space Needle. Now, this is just notable considering that terrorism is fake. I mean, prove me wrong. The burden of proof has shifted. And if it's all fake and orchestrated, then this is obviously part of the script. So we can kind of see another tie-in here. And the trailer for Final Destination is simply that. It's all about this 9/11-like event happening at the Twin Towers, or I'm sorry, at the Space Needle. And then, of course, the first movie precedes the Twin Towers going down. It overlapped. So let me go through my notes. We have a few other things to catch up on. I've been doing a lot of deep dives into topics that we've talked about before. Like, look at this. This is just a good example. Here you have, this is somewhat unrelated, but this is the Littleton shooting psyop. Look at how it compares to the movie. And that's why I'm bringing this up. Predictive programming is sort of a misnomer. We're not talking about crystal ball like psychic predictions. There's nothing mystical about it. We have to demystify it. We have to look at what is truly just propaganda overlapping within the entertainment and the news. And this is from peaceofmindful.com, which is a great site. And if you just look at the striking similarity between Trinity and Morpheus and Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Now, this shot in particular looks like it's professionally staged. And I'm saying a random photo shouldn't match something from Hollywood. Like, this is just very well staged. The wardrobe, the look, and the proximity of the Matrix coming out to the Columbine shootings. And all this was noted by the media. They're the ones who drew attention to this. And I'm suggesting that it's part of the bigger design. Here's what Peace of Mindful said, quote, "These blockbuster psy-operas require serious show business vets to pull these things together and to keep track of parallel narratives that are engineered to divide the public and simultaneously have the public agree that the hijackings, the shootings actually did take place." So this is what I'm getting at here, is that they use these parallel narratives. When I say concurrent programming, we're talking parallel narratives. What's happening in the movies is happening on the streets, in the fake news. So it's not predicting reality. It's foreshadowing and forming a backdrop for news. That's how it works and has worked consistently. I have a few other related things, but that ties into this notion here that the movie coming out has a great deal of significance. Another example of concurrent programming, Sinners. Now, Sinners, okay, one of my criteria for deciding whether or not something is predictive programming, because someone had brought this up, it was JLB had mentioned that he had written a piece about the Titanic and it had some interesting correspondence to the Titan submersible. And he said, is this predictive programming? I said, no. To be programming, it has to be mainstream. Your blog isn't being broadcast to millions of people. It's not part of the body of, it's not aligned with the PSYOP intentionally. So you would just call that a coincidence, if that. But when I say predictive or concurrent programming, I'm talking about stuff that's obviously mainstream. So now Sinners, which I said was going to contain concurrent programming before I even saw it, is one of the biggest horror films in history. It's the sixth one to cross $200 million at the domestic box office. So it's a huge film, not insignificant. And before I watched it, I saw the trailer and I said, look, white vampires, there's some kind of clan narrative. You got the Ku Klux Klan is actually killed at the end by the main character. So you have this race agitprop built into it. And then the main character was a twin. One of the twins dies, and the other guy's holding him. And at the same time, you had the Austin Metcalf killing by Carmelo Anthony, who the twin, Austin, died bleeding in his brother's arms. And that whole thing was framed within the context of race thanks to January 6er Jake Lang. Provocateur comes out and he tries to turn Austin Metcalf into a white Trayvon Martin. And that was just the beginning of several high-profile race war psyops. Then we had the Rodney Hinton Jr. and his son, Ryan Hinton. So if that story, if you're not familiar, these are all happening at the same time. You got Shiloh with her racial epithets at the playground going viral. You got the Austin Metcalf and people taking sides racially. It's race and class. These things are kind of synonymous, like Luigi. The same people backing Luigi back Carmelo Anthony, for example. The same people who support Shiloh Hendricks support Daniel Penny. Now, in this case, again, we're talking about the follow-up with Rodney Hinton Jr. His son gets killed by the police, and it looks incendiary, like the police didn't have to shoot him. And so now the father's retaliation by killing a cop looks like revenge. And people are actually siding with this guy. Now, who did he kill? He killed some guy named Henderson who served 33 years, and he's a retired deputy, and he gets killed. His birthday is 6/11. So you know, the 6/11/33 kind of built into that story. And again, it walks along the same lines. And Rodney Hinton visually was presented like Luigi on his perp walk, surrounded by cops. Very dramatic. And the dramatic nature of it had me thinking, okay, this looks very staged and fake. Let's continue to see. And then you have another story where these three white kids try to break into a black man's house. His name is Tyler Butler. So the name Tyler, we talked about the significance of this last time. Butler, obviously some significance, as in Butler, Pennsylvania. Well, he shoots them, and the media frames it as he's the murderer, and they were just kids playing a prank. The knocking game, like we knock and run. Well, I'm sorry, but you do that at the front door. If you're doing the back door, you're probably breaking in, and many neighbors said that there were a lot of break-ins in the area. So now you have an obvious racial double standard. How come Tyler Butler doesn't have a Second Amendment right to defend his house? Oh, that's because he's black. That's how it's being looked at. And Luigi's getting the death penalty. Carmelo Anthony's probably not going to go free. Daniel Penny got free. So they're really highlighting in all these events double standards. And then you have the racist at the park getting a huge $750,000 payday. And this is just scratching the surface. But I'm just pointing out how this movie, Sinners, preceded all this racial agitprop in the various psyops that we have been pointing out. Not a coincidence. Lord Laney says, I was thinking the other day, Cleveland, what if it's not physical cleaving, but some kind of race war dividing cleaving? Yeah, exactly. And then you got the chop zone there in Seattle. There's this constant refrain here. But as far as, okay, Kraken in 2022, there's a lot of this stuff in like Stranger Things with the ground cracked open. But 2022, there was a lot of memes in the media. Like it was actually started earlier, but this constant refrain among even Q, release the Kraken. But the Kraken, the crack, the focus on Hunter Biden's crack pipe, I'm like, what's going on with this? Well, this all happens concurrently with Pluto's return to where it was when America was founded on July 4th, 1776. And the alignment of Pluto's return corresponded with this inundation of Kraken symbolism, like the Seattle Kraken. Right before the election, the Seattle Kraken's trailer came out, and it has a video, 1 minute, 13 seconds, 113, where it looks like Seattle gets an EMP, some kind of attack from the sea, and the symbol of the Kraken around the Space Needle. So again, the Kraken to me sounds almost like an earthquake reference. And then one more point here. Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, corresponds with Hades, and it's Hades who releases the Kraken. So I'm thinking crack, fault line, earthquake. Okay, moving on here. There's still quite a lot. Now, I did talk about this, and just to clarify, so Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones are talking about how they think there's going to be some kind of race war psyop, and they mention Patriot Front. So Shadow of Urza seems to think that it will be a race attack against the whites, like just like in the movie that I pointed out, Sinners, where the main character shoots the Klan. But what they're suggesting here is it might go the other way, like whites killing blacks. But however it works, Tucker Carlson is predicting an ethnic psyop, an ethnic false flag, rather. He's calling it a false flag. He's assuming it's going to be real or manufactured, like some government agents, black ops killing a bunch of people. And I'm saying it's going to be fake. It's going to be as fake as the violence we saw in the movies. But he and Jones were talking about this, and I think it's highly significant for a few reasons. One, last time they were together, Tucker kept on bringing up how Alex Jones predicted 9/11. He's prescient. He's a prophet. How'd you do it? And they talked about the lone gunman, predictive programming. They really got into it. And now this time Tucker's like, I'm going to make a prediction. So to me, this sounds like Tucker trying to establish some street cred. So when this racial false flag occurs, he's going to say, I called it. So there's a Tucker prediction out there. And I consider that to be more predictive programming. So we have a few things going on. We have the psyop-rich environment, all kinds of racial psyops and tensions that they're inflaming on purpose. If you've been on X is a hotbed of extreme rhetoric, and this is the disease X that I discussed, that they're using X to facilitate radicalization so they can justify widespread censorship, locking down the internet and quarantining it until they vaxxed our minds, essentially. That's where we're headed. And I said this was the whole point when Musk bought X, and now it's happening because my channel caught disease X, if you think about it. I made some Yay video. I get censored for it because they're censoring Yay. So Yay, making this song, has provided a pretext for widespread censorship to quarantine the harmful mind viruses so they don't get into the comments. So Musk is leaking into the comments all this bad stuff. Not a coincidence that Musk was at Dawn Day 2 with Ye. These guys are all associated. And that was the event on 2/22/2022, the specific day that Pluto's alignment was in its place where America was founded. And the significance of that, by the way, is they say that when Pluto returns, the empire pretty much falls, historically speaking, if you believe the history. And so America has reached that point. We've passed that point. What's going to happen next? But right now we have this divisive race war rhetoric stuff that's dividing the public, and it's very evident on X, which not surprising. And then we have this buildup towards some kind of 9/11 like event scheduled for Seattle. which again, if you look at predictive programming as a model for predicting the future, which it does, I mean, hindsight's 2020. We're not cherry picking this stuff. I mean, look, predictive programming is something of a misnomer because it's not always way in advance. It's often real time. So, however you want to define it, I like the term concurrent. I use both. But the fact of it is, there's been this tremendous buildup for a Seattle attack, as much of a buildup as there was for 9/11. But instead of the Twin Towers being the focal point, the Space Needle is the focal point. And now we have this Final Destination Bloodlines tying together 9/11 and the future Seattle attack. And now the movie itself shows you how, yeah, we started with the plane attack, but it was always going to be about the Space Needle. And so this is actually going back to the 60s, this new movie. And the fact is, in the trailer, you've got the falling towers, you've got the cracking open of the ground, the earthquake stuff, and you've got the Lincoln assassination symbolism here in front of the exploding Space Needle. Like, this is a lot of overlap, and this is super consistent with everything that we've been talking about recently. I mean, the head wound Seattle connection. Now, there's something else. I was looking into what kind of protests that are going on because there's going to be a pretty big event on Trump's birthday, which is 6/14, a military parade. And look at this. There's a group called No Kings. So the No Kings on President's Day. I mean, there's a few different protest groups out there, but the No Kings thing strikes me as interesting because we're talking about the crown, the corona symbolism, and the headshot. So I think it's all symbolic of the crown, like a coup. I have a few other things that we'll go over in detail tonight. For example, I've been talking, if you've been following my channel since at least 2022, I've been talking about the schism, the bifurcation in the Psywar, the mirroring of the left and the right. And I've been talking about right-wing wokeism for some time, saying that those people who are super obsessed with blaming a certain ethnic group for ruling the world are no different than the people who blame whites for systemic racism controlling the world. So I described it as alt woke or right woke. Well, right woke is now a pretty mainstream concept. It's been mainstreamed in the last week. So you have this James Lindsay says it's very simple and straightforward. Right-wing critical theory, woke right. I called it critical Jew theory because critical race theory specifically blames whiteness and critical Jew theory blames Jewishness. These are identical models, left and right, victim politics. So I'm just pointing out here that we called this out a couple years ago, and now it's mainstream rhetoric, the woke right. Other news, Sean Diddy Combs' federal criminal trial began yesterday in New York City. He's got 5 charges: racketeering, sex trafficking, fraud, coercion, human trafficking, basically. We'll see what happens with that. I've been following it. I talked about the Shiloh Hendricks raised $700,000, and the 5-year-old kid raised $340K. So that's $1 million PSYOP payout there. Here's an article from Raw Story. Biff Tannen, this analyst says that Donald Trump is more Biff Tannen than Michael Corleone. So the Godfather, a bad mafia don, a bad don. We've been talking about the symbolism of Abaddon, the destroyer in the abyss, Revelation 9/11, how it ties into the Terminator 2 concept of the, again, Terminator 2, James Cameron production. You know, he had, that was all essentially, interestingly too, that has the symbol of the evil cop. That's where they really introduced the evil cop. And again, James Cameron was working on Terminator 2 when the guy who filmed the Rodney King beating walked by. He was filming the James Cameron set, and then he goes down the street and he sees the Rodney King beating. So in the same shot, same film, same tape, the tape that sparked the riots, you have a James Cameron film. But in this, we've been talking about James Cameron. He does the Titanic, and he's filming this thing called Ghosts in the Abyss on 9/11. So connecting all of this, we had already noted how Revelation 9/11 talks about this entity, this angel over the abyss they call Abaddon. And this to me all relates to the idea of the nuke that sinks the Twin Towers, or the sinking of the Titanic by the iceberg, the destroyer. In other words, what is the destroyer? Well, the destroyer is Donald Trump. He is Abaddon. He is Apollyon. If you look at the biblical metascript overlay here. And at the time that he was going to prison, in 2023, 4/4/2023, they arrested him, all this stuff. At that time, he was being likened to a mafia don. And that's when we really started calling him a bad don. Again, a kind of a joke on Abaddon. And you can see this in One Eye Jack's video that we did. But now they're saying, no, he's not Michael Corleone. He's Biff Tannen. And by the way, a Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola. Think about that significance there too. Francis Ford Coppola, there's so many things I can go into, but Megalopolis in particular has the story of this Russian satellite falling down. And when that happens, everything begins to change. That's like the catalyst. And we just had the Russian satellite that was launched 53 years ago to Venus crash down to Earth a few days ago on the 10th. But now he says, not Michael Corleone, he's Biff Tannen. So Biff Tannen is another character that was designed to look like Trump, to be Trump. Donald Trump is the basis for Biff Tannen. And the significance here is that Biff Tannen takes over the world. He's got time travel. He's the evil villain in the story, but he's defeated. And the death of Biff Tannen is more foreshadowing for Trump. And then also significantly, the Back to the Future movie series is one of the most 9/11 predictive programming dense movies out there. Undeniable stuff. So in the body of predictive programming, the Back to the Future is one of the best sources for 9/11 stuff, but also for Donald Trump stuff. And it has a lot of clues, other things, the years that it takes place, all of it highly significant. Leo Friend says, if you drove nonstop from New York City to Seattle on the fastest route, I-90, the trip is 42 hours. Interesting. Well, Washington is the 42nd state. The Space Needle, the UFO, is 42 meters wide. And to get up the thing, you got to ride the elevator, which is 42 seconds. What does this mean? Well, 42 has been consistently correlated in all the various psyops with the themes of falling, darkness, blackouts. In fact, 1977, 7/13, the date Trump was shot, 7/13, 1977, you had the Manhattan blackouts. And 42 years later to the day, 7/13, 2019, same area, 42nd Street on, hit with blackouts. The first set of blackouts, that was when the Son of Sam was running amok. Dave Berkowitz, DB42, Dave Berkowitz, Son of Sam, mass murderer. The movie about him is called SOS, directed by Spike Lee, which is also highly interesting. Spike Lee's an interesting director in this context as well. I recently watched his Black Klansman, and they have David Duke, young David Duke, with a thick mustache, looking exactly like present-day Nick Fuentes. I'm like, wait a minute, Nick Fuentes in 2025 looks like this fictionalized younger version of David Duke. And that movie came out 5 years ago. And it was definitely referencing Charlottesville and Nick Fuentes intentionally. But the mustache was kind of like, wow, how did Spike Lee predict that Fuentes would grow that out? I mean, it was kind of the movie's funny now and looking back, because like you have the scene where the leader of the Klan, the Grand Dragon, Dave Duke, is toasting everyone. They're all just saying America first, America first. Like, okay, that's pretty heavy-handed. Nick Fuentes being used as the basis for this character, sort of like how Laura Loomer is the basis for a character in The Madness, as is Musk. And speaking of, Laura Loomer is slated to take a fall or disappear from the world stage. I am basing this off of The Madness. And The Madness, very predictive series. It was the number one. It's on Netflix. It was like this number one show at the time. It has the Luigi story. It has the leftist uprising against Musk story built into it. It's got the Laura Loomer built into it. But The Madness, the title itself, references the ideas and the memes, the mind viruses that turn right-wingers violent. That's specifically what it's referencing. Disease X is the madness. Now, 28 days later is about these chimps who are forced to watch violence on TV, and then they become violent and they pass it on like a virus to humans, and then everybody wipes each other out. So the mind virus is built into that. And the writer of that directed Civil War. We've got right-wingers, anti-media, they caught mind viruses, and they have a big civil war. You got Trump in office, and there's a big debate or fight over it. And he's at the end killed by a black female, which I think represents Kamala Harris. But the Civil War director wrote 28 days later. Well, 28 years later, which is in that series, comes out next month as well. So we've got 28 years later and Final Destination. So there's some interesting connections here because it's all, I think these are all overlapping. Let's see here. There's a Hulu limited series, by the way, Sean Diddy Combs Trial Reenactment. SAGAFTRA. They are already, right now, casting lookalike actors for speaking roles in a coming special about the Diddy trial. So is this art imitates life? I would say it's art imitates art. Imitates art. Real life doesn't really factor in here. I mean, if you go back, the Diddy thing seems to have been predicted by many of his media appearances, him in jail as well. So, I mean, I'm not sure where the real and fake ends with that case. How much are we to believe? I mean, there is a video of him roughly treating a woman in a hotel. I don't think that's fake, but a lot of it's very questionable. I don't take any of it at face value. The timing of it, very interesting. We'll see. But isn't Diddy sharing a cell with Luigi and Sam? No, who else? Bankman Freud. There's a few people in there. It's just like, wait, you're all in the same cell. R. Kelly, and then the Prophet of Doom, Frank James. 91 Okie says David Duke is a fed and Laura Loomer is a man. Laura Loomer is a lot of things. Definitely a fed, a provocateur, but I would draw the line at that. But she seems nice. She eats dog food on camera I guess she's a dog person. That's a good thing, right? I don't know. Seems a little close to Trump, like almost erotomania close. And that's probably all by design because she's publicly being excoriated for her conspiracy theorist views, and specifically because she's an advisor. She has too much influence. She's got people in the NSA kicked out. In fact, interestingly, and I said this again before it happened, I said Laura Loomer is going to be taken from the world stage as per the madness, because in the madness she gets too close to some truth. She finds out that this tech billionaire had influenced the election, had interfered, and she was about to expose it, and then she dies. So I said, watch Laura Loomer. Well, what happens? All of a sudden she gets a lot of press coverage for helping Trump, for advising Trump, and some NSA guys get fired. She claims she's getting violent death threats from NSA connected people. So that's the start of it. Then, more specifically, she calls out Jack Dorsey for having evidence about election interference on Twitter, and that Twitter is a crime scene. Now, calling out Dorsey for election interference 2020 and claiming that she can expose it, that's exactly what Laura Loomer's character did as Laura Jennings in The Madness. So Laura Jennings in The Madness dies for exposing election fraud evidence. So we have several instances here where it overlaps, and they provided a context and they've set the stage for her to be so inconvenient that she has to go. And one more point with Laura Loomer. In 2017, she jumped on the stage where they were doing Julius Caesar in Central Park, and he was dressed to look like Donald Trump, and he gets stabbed 23 times. So she jumped on the stage to interrupt that. She called out The Atlantic for predictive programming for the Trump assassination. She called out Time Magazine for the same. So there's been at least 3 examples I can point to where Loomer has been on top of predictive programming. but in a misdirection kind of way. She's not saying, oh, they're going to stage something, it's all fake. She's like, no, this is a threat. So again, this all tells me she knows too much to be totally ignorant about how this stuff works. And the fact that she has a parallel in the entertainment propaganda, a conspiracy theorist who is taken out, who's described as crazy, that's very significant. And also they pointed out, they call her Laura loony, and she can't own a gun. So she does have mental health in her issues in her past, according to this story. So we'll see how this turns out. Penguinati says, of course, all of Diddy's crimes are fake. PSYOPs are never a mix of real and fake. Yeah, that's a great starting point there. Whenever we look at an event, like they say, oh, 20 people died, but then you see some shenanigans. Like, well, maybe, like, for example, Uvalde, you have this high death count, but at the same time, there was an FBI TV series they had to cancel because the season finale mirrored what happened at the event. Like the off-duty Border Patrol agent putting a stop to it. In the FBI show, it was an FBI agent without a warrant putting a stop to a shooting. Well, they canceled that show. Stranger Things had to put a warning label because all the dead kids in the opening scene. So we're like, okay, if there's any indication that the event is staged, then you can't start with their body count. You can't start with 20. You got to start at 0, because if any part of it is fake, then it's all fake and staged. Same with this Diddy story. If any part of it seems fake or staged or planned, then we shouldn't base any reportage from it as true until proven false. So the only thing that gave it any credibility to me, because if this is a planned psyop, I mean, what was that movie Blink Twice, where they had the white parties and they had the snake oil stuff, like the baby oil. So there's too much here for me to say this is real. So in retrospect, could they have faked the hotel beating scene? Well, yeah. The same people, the same type of minds, the same level of genius that goes into World Wrestling Entertainment goes into our news psyops. So I'm with Penguinati Auto Hoaxer. It's never a mix of real and fake. The body count is 0. He says Diddy's WWE scene with his girlfriend Cassie is Vince McMahon scripts. Exactly. You know, I know I have a family member who used to work for World Wrestling Entertainment, lighting and stage. The stage craft requires so many people, but he worked in lighting. And for several years, I had this connection because I used to do murals. And, after they do the wrestling matches, they actually throw away the mats because of bloodborne pathogens and other reasons. They throw these things away. And so for about a year, there was a person who would come through town, and in the back of the truck, instead of throwing away the mats, I would collect these things. And I would cut up World Wrestling Entertainment mats and use them for murals. So there's a period of time where I sold a ton of art on wrestling mats, used wrestling mats. But anyway, I was speaking with him the other day, and he talked about how they would bring out actors or these wrestlers, and the wrestlers would say something like a meme, a buzzword. They would try to force meme something, and they would pay attention to the audience and the reaction. And they studied every reaction, every every social media post, everything that you are doing to engage with this entertainment is being studied so that they can learn how to best manipulate the audiences. In fact, I remember back then hearing about how they use green screens to make it look like the stadiums were full, much like politicians do. And then if you look at the overlap between Trump and Vince McMahon, and I believe Vince McMahon's wife is working with Trump in education, it goes way back. That's where Trump learned how to blade himself when he cut his ear. Girl said, why did OJ go along with it? They must be blackmailed or compromised. Why did Diddy go along with it? That's a good question, because I understand getting into psyops, the money, the incentives, but why would you agree to such a reprehensible role? Why would you agree to be destroyed publicly? Well, it's an interesting question, but if you look at his character, is this inconsistent? Was this all a role? Like, for example, why would somebody play a villain in a movie? So to them, it's just a movie. There must be some bigger incentive here, and it's an inside joke. OJ, for example, what's with him? I mean, OJ was in that movie where what was it called? Capricorn 1, fake moon landing stuff. And again, OJ Simpson getting involved in psyops. He was in sports. He was in movies. I don't think it's compromise. Like, I really think that this is a gig. That crisis acting is like the new A-listers. If you're an actor and you get into the hoaxes, you're elite, because now you got high security clearance. You're doing government propaganda, like that guy Steven Gutenberg, who became the face of the LA fires. It's like the LA's burning, and they're like, "Oh, Steven Gutenberg's running around clearing the streets and moving cars and helping old ladies out of there on their wheelchairs. He's helping the firemen." Yeah, I don't think some retired Hollywood actor is helping fire departments. That's insane. And he had to point out, but the electric cars couldn't be moved. So there had to be some agenda there. But I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, wait, Steven Gutenberg was just in that movie Lavalantula, which most of you probably saw, where Los Angeles is burning, and then because there's these giant tarantulas that came out of a volcano and they're spitting fire, and he's fighting the fires. But anyway, I'm just pointing out, for an action movie type character to be employed in a psyop like this, it makes sense. They build these characters up in the world of fiction, and then they superimpose that into reality. Just like Trump, you have him as the real estate magnate, you have him as the reality TV show guy and the president, but in addition to just him, you've had dozens or more examples of him or characters portraying him in the movies, like Biff Tannen. Like, this isn't art imitating life. This is psyops imitating the art. Okay, moving on. Going through my notes. Russell Brand said, "I used to take quite a lot of cocaine, crack, heroin, LSD, methamphetamines, ecstasy, marijuana, and pharmaceutical drugs, but now I'm lit by the Holy Spirit." My response to that was, Aleister Crowley used the same formula. If you've read Diary of a Drug Fiend or the Book of the Law, it's really all about drugs, sex, drugs, rock and roll. But Russell Brand has a 33 tattooed on his wrist. Russell Brand did a tour called 33. The fact that he's portraying himself as Christian, it's performative, if anything, at best. Performative Christianity, likely as a cover for his Illuminati beliefs. Observing Reality says, psyops framing the future. Well, okay, that's exactly what I'm suggesting here. Because if the national dialogue is race, and you got this big race movie, top movie, you have these psyops that involve major players like January Sixers, you got the Shiloh thing, Give, Send, Go, biggest. I mean, these are all psychological operations that are framing our expectations. So if there is an event where somebody pops off, they're going to say, "Oh, this was going to happen." You'll notice that when the psyops happen, people will say, "Oh, we expected this." Like when Trump was shot in the ear. Leading up to it, who didn't predict it? It wasn't just us. I mean, we were talking about it with specificity and calling out as fake before it happened, even on that day. However, leading up to it, Alex Jones was saying they're going to get Trump. People around Jones on a show, if they get Trump, it will be good because we will retaliate. Loomer, they're going to get Trump. Look at this magazine. So there were so many people talking about Trump assassination up until the event. And then when it happened, nobody was surprised. So the psyops take away the shock or the surprise at something unexpected. It's like a suggestion, planting suggestions. I describe it as they're boring the neural pathways. Also, filling your imagination with the imagery that they don't give you. So you didn't see anybody in Uvalde. You didn't see any dead bodies. No dead kids. You just saw a bunch of cops outside looking like they didn't care, which was part of the psyop. But if you turned on Netflix and you saw the opening scene to season 4 Stranger Things, you saw a bunch of slaughtered children and the main character Elle playing with Tops, which interestingly, at the time we were talking about the Tops supermarket shooting. Lots of overlaps with all these films. In fact, in Stranger Things, the main villain is played by Matthew Modine, who plays Joker in Full Metal Jacket. And on the season finale, 4/8, he gets shot. Highly significant. The 4/8/8/4 connections, the numbers are just overwhelming, but they're consistent. But it's overwhelming evidence of coordination between entertainment and quote unquote real life. And these truthers are screwed up. And their only explanation here is these are psyops where they're killing people. So there's like black ops. So it's even darker than just the usual story. If a mentally ill person did a bad thing, their version is, no, this is done by the deep state. But they agree it was done. And that's where we differ. Leo Francis, 1776 will commence again. Alex Jones on Piers Morgan. Yeah, that's a great quote too, because he's on Piers Morgan mad at the 1.6 billion hollow point rounds the DHS purchased. He said they're going to kill the Patriots with it. 1.6. January 6th. Jones was radicalized at Waco. Why was Waco raided? Oh, well, they had 1.6 million rounds. 1.6? Also radicalized at Waco, Timothy McVeigh, who we just brought up. So McVeigh, Jones, Koresh burned at 33. McVeigh executed 33. On the anniversary of Waco, McVeigh blew up that government building. But also on the anniversary of Waco, Trump was on trial when Maxwell Azrello set himself on fire. Another Burning Man 419 connection. Trump kicks off his 2024 campaign in Waco the day after Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse. There's quite a lot with Waco that we could get into. But what Jones said, 1776 will commence again if you try to take the guns, that all ties into 1/6. So 1776 represents the right side of the political horseshoe, right-wing, extreme views, and their version of reality, their vision. The left is represented by the year 1619, and they want that reckoning, where 1619 has a reckoning with 1776. Who is going to define the future? What's the worldview? Because this is a clash of visions. It's a conflict. That's why Obama's movie, Leave the World Behind, had so many 1619 references, and it had the White Lion ship hitting the shore, because the White Lion is the slave ship that arrived in 1619 that kicked all the stuff off. Not a coincidence either that the Francis Scott Key monument was vandalized by Black Lives Matter, the one that's over there by the Golden Gate Bridge. And they put up a temporary installment that was called The Reckoning, and it had to do with the 1619 arrival. And they had a monument for all of the slaves that were brought in, or the enslaved Africans. So what we have here, Francis Scott Key National Anthem, 1776, patriotism, and then America's dark history, its past, this reckoning. So Obama can therefore be associated with 1619, Trump with 1776. And these two exist in a dynamic. They're always interacting. Trump calling out Obama's birth certificate back when it was still the Tea Party. Then it merged into MAGA. But there has been this back and forth. Not a coincidence that Trump took Obama's portrait from that side of the White House and replaced it with a picture of himself with his head bleeding from 7/13. Because the Trump head wound has been associated with Obama in all of the predictive programming. Most recently, well, I was going to say Megalopolis, but no, there's another example, Mickey 17, so many of these head wound references. But the Obama element, though, is really prominent in Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, where the mayor is played by Giancarlo Esposito, who is the one who orchestrates the assassination attempt. Same actor plays the CEO in The Boys, who's the antagonist to the Trump character, who, again, episode 4/8, Assassination Run, aired at the same time as the assassination attempt on Trump, and they had to alter the title. Same actor plays Sidewinder, the antagonist to Harrison Ford as president in Captain America, and the trailer of which came out the day before the Trump shooting, and they altered it because it was so close, where the president's character gets shot at, jumps on the ground. Yeah, the McVeigh execution on 6/11 corresponds also to Trump getting shot at 6:11 p.m. McVeigh killed at 33. Trump shot 6/11, 33 seconds. And again, he was 33 years old on 6/11. Then 90 days later, you had 33-year-old Mohammed Atta, lead hijacker, hitting the Twin Towers. So if you look at this in the bigger picture, McVeigh is to domestic violent extremism what Osama bin Laden is to the external threat. So he's kind of like the OBL of domestic violent extremists. He was radicalized at Waco, motivated, or I would say perhaps inspired by the Turner Diaries. And the Turner Diaries was written by is it Andrew Pierce, a guy born on 9/11, 1933. So 9/11, 33, 6/11, 33. See a pattern here? Like Rodney Hinton running over the guy born 6/11, served 33 years. These are numbers that they put out there. They blast these out there. They're impossible to ignore. These are the conspicuous clues. And if you look at psyops, like you look at movies, directors don't leave anything in the frame by accident. If it's there, you're meant to see it. It's building to something. So we're looking at these consistent uses. Not insignificant that the right has attached 6/11 to the biblical Ephesians armor of God, and they've been using that phrase in that verse for years and years. And one of their heroes, Tim Ballard, the child trafficking guy, Tim Ballard makes a big point about 6/11 because he's given this religious pendant that has Timothy 6/11 on it. Not for Timothy McVeigh, but it's a biblical reference. But Tim Ballard took it as significant. But 6/11. So I'm just pointing out these numbers because that date is less than a month away. It's been associated with the domestic violent extremists, with Waco, with McVeigh. 6/11 also has a lot of nuke connections. The Batman movie, for example. In the Batman movie, the Riddler character has his online radicals, and they bomb the dams, and they flood the polls. So the election's happening. Gotham gets flooded. Gotham's underwater on 11/6. So 6/11, 11/6, Gotham underwater. The Riddler, representing a Q-like character, this masked anonymous person with online radicals. And midterms 2022, the GOP slogan was flood the polls. And that's when it happened in the movie. The polls got flooded. So there you have another 11/6. And then Oppenheimer, the movie Oppenheimer, which has 33 in it. Very significantly, they had to get 33 pounds of marbles as they were building up to the perfect configuration for the bomb. So you had that. And then Oppenheimer's wearing the badge K6, 11/6. The film was IMAX film of 11 miles long, weighed 600 pounds. So 11/6 is associated with the domestic violent extremist terror attack and the nuke. It's all wrapped in to this code. 6/11, 11/6, 9/11, 119. And I mentioned the connection between James Cameron and 9/11 because the Titanic movie foreshadows with the ship splitting in two, like twin towers sinking separately, jumpers. He's at the Titanic on 9/11. The symbolism of the sunken towers and the sunken boat both represent the West. So you already have 9/11 connections with James Cameron. Even in Terminator 2, there's this scene where they put 9/11 in the ditch, and then the truck blows up, and it's all like, what, 9/11 stuff. But I mentioned how his influence was directly evident there with the LA riots because of the Rodney King beating. The guy who filmed the Rodney King beating was filming Terminator 2 about the evil cop. And then he films real life evil cops beating Rodney King. Well, Rodney King was hit 33 times. Look it up on Wiki. 33 times he was hit. They beat him for 1 minute, 19 seconds. So think about the significance of that particular piece of propaganda and the riots that followed, the narratives that followed. So a guy named Rodney King, very significant, 33,119. And of course, this Roger Rodney Hinton. So you got Rodney again. So Rodney kills a guy born 6'11", who was serving for 33 years. Again, lots of overlap. And another connection here, of course, is the Tyree Nichols was compared to the Rodney King beating, and his funeral and the protests were attended by Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter. And they even held his funeral and had the eulogy read by Al Sharpton at Mason Temple, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his final speech before he was assassinated on 4/4. And again, on 4/4/2023, Trump was in jail, the 55th anniversary of the MLK assassination. They did a lot of overlapping with Trump and martyrs, like Abraham Lincoln, Jesus, MLK Jr. All right, let's move on. Help Mike and Taylor relocate. So this is Mike and Taylor. They are, now this guy's a Proud Boy, apparently. And they were singing the new Yay song on camera badly. And they were then doxxed, and they claimed that they were threatened just like Shiloh was. So they must have seen there's an opportunity to make money for being racist and then getting defended by racists. So they put up a give send go for 88,000. So 88 again, HH, hail H word, obviously. Help Mike and Taylor relocate on May 8th. They released on May 8th, 2025. Ye released the song of the summer. We were celebrating his birthday and singing along on the way to the party. So their explanation is they're just innocently singing this song, and now they're under attack. So they want to relocate. So they put up a goal of 88,000. They've already raised, as of yesterday, it was at 3,600. I haven't checked it yet, but this is money being raised for the same reason Shiloh raised money. So this is being looked at, and who's giving them money? But I did some cursory research, and it turns out this guy is a Proud Boy. So Proud Boy equals Fed. I think Kyle Rittenhouse was initiated into the Proud Boys at a bar he was too young to go into. And the Proud Boys are self-proclaimed Western chauvinists. So think about that. In 2020, you had the scene of George Floyd on the ground being kneeled on by Derek Chauvin. Western chauvinism, Derek Western chauvinism. The West and Western chauvinism, systemic oppression being epitomized in that scene. We have the defender of the elite, the police class, kneeling on the neck of the poor. That's the framing of the entire Psywar. And they encapsulated it in that particular scene for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And if you remember, 8:46 a.m. is when the first plane hit the Twin Towers. So you've got 8:46, and the sun set in the Twin Cities, so Twin Towers, Twin Cities, the sun set on that day that George Floyd died at 8:46. So look it up, May 25th, 2020, sunset, Twin Cities, 8:46, 9/11, 8:46, kneeled on 8:46. What is all that? And that's just scratching the surface. But it just shows, it speaks to the precision. And this is the precision you get in movie productions. Everything is planned. Nothing is coincidental or accidental in these things. So the significance here, the twins. We're talking about the Twin Towers. We're talking about the George Floyd event and this bifurcation in our national dialogue. And isn't it interesting that Sinners is about twins and that the Austin Metcalf is a twin? So there was a lot of twin stuff we were pointing out. There's just a lot, but just sticking to this theme here, we have the 9/11ing, these big events associated with twins. So that's in the air right now. The twins, the race war stuff, building up, and then we're less than a month away from Seattle 6/11, which again, there are suggestions that this would be the next 9/11. Now, will it happen on that date? I don't see why not. I don't see why not. And I was already saying that it's consistent with what we have observed. But Significantly, Final Destination is coming out right before, and it's focused on the Space Needle and has the 9/11 connection built into it. That's just too much. This isn't cherry picking. This isn't Texas sharpshooter fallacy. This is script analysis, film analysis at this point. And the term metascript is used to encompass a script that takes place over the course of decades, over many movies. And of course, the metascript is the script history. So people say, well, his story. Well, yeah, it is his story, being Big Brother's story. But what is that story? Well, the story is the history that they have written out for us that we're going to be living through, moving on into the future. That's what history is. And that script, if you were to bring out the script for what's going to happen, I would call it the metascript. Yeah, this script is what's going to happen in the 20th century. And the metascript is real. It is what they're using. It is what is being implemented, as evidenced by the space program, by 9/11, by 2020. The fact that every day the fake news steers the dominant narrative and then gets written into our history, carved into stone, tells you that our collective history is bent towards fakery. So you cannot claim to be an objectivist with the grasp of objective reality if your frame of reference is the consensus frame of reference. The collective has been dragged into what I call the world stage. We live in a movie augmented reality, and it's not just art imitating life and it's just so close because the artists are in tune with the zeitgeist. No, it's straight up propaganda, and they've taken a heavy hand to manipulating us en masse to steer us towards predetermined ends. And it works. We've been watching it this whole time. It's incontestable. I thought maybe 2020 would have been a wake up, but no, because the anti-position is controlled opposition. Anti-vax guardrailed. It formed a wall. It actually protected the system. All the anti-vaxxers did is they protected the integrity of the PSYOP entertainment complex. They were a necessary component, a foil, the heel. But their purpose was to maintain the reality of what was happening on TV, to maintain the illusion, not calling anything fake, to infuse alternative fear, an alternative version of the pandemic, an alternative explanation for what everybody agreed was happening. And that's where skeptics have to diverge. Auto hoaxers have to split from them and say, no, look, you're operating within their fictional universe. That's why you're hyper active, angry, raging, and terrified. If you're scared, terrified, and mad, they got you. You have the madness. You caught it. You caught their mind aids. And infinite plane radio is mind war inoculation. If you're inoculated against the stuff, you're not mad. You're not enraged. But they've created a culture of woke where if you're woke, you're not asleep. So it's a moral posturing. Oh, you guys are asleep. You're apathetic. You don't care, but I'm woke. I'm woke to the systemic oppression. Well, the right wing conspiracy realm is alt woke. They're just as agitated as their leftist counterparts. And it's because they're awake. The red pills woke them up and everybody's sleeping. And that's why they're always yelling, like, wake up, wake up. They're poisoning us. There's fluoride in the water and all that stuff. Speaking of fluoride in the water, let me see if I can pull this up. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made headlines because he took his family out for Mother's Day at some creek that apparently is off limits because of the bacteria levels. Here it is. RFK Jr. swims in sewage with grandchildren despite National Park Service's bacteria warning. So Kennedy shared a picture of himself submerged in DC's Rock Creek, which is under a swimming ban. Remember, he was field dressing a bloated bear carcass in the back of his van, as one does, years ago, and left it in Central Park. And then that made news recently because, like, oh, an unsolved animal mutilation. It was RFK's. But I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm sure it didn't have fluoride in it, so it's safe for him, I guess. To me, this looks psyopy, by the way. The anti-vax guy is also swimming in dirty water, walking barefoot on planes. His history is pretty well known. It's just, in other words, this guy doesn't believe in protection of any kind. So this is just on brand. I don't know if it's a psyop, but I think it's notable here because he's the anti-vax guy. And if you remember in 2020, the anti-vax crowd versus the vax crowd, pro and anti. The antis were looked at as dirty, heathens, unwashed, unbaptized, uncleansed of the sin of the day, refusing the salvation of the injectable Eucharist. So you have this dichotomy, the split between the saved and unsaved, the clean and the dirty, the sinful. The new sinful are the virusful. You see, the virus is a modern iteration of sin, but it's a sin the left believes in. Like the left doesn't believe in God, they believe in Gaia. They don't believe in heaven, they believe in space. They don't believe in the traditional version of this analogous concept. So notice how the right wing is terrified of left-wing sinners. That's why they're always mad at the Grammy Awards and their scandalous costumes and their satanic imagery. The right was driven by the moral panic of the satanic panic, Pizzagate thing. So the right wing believes in moral panic. They're scared of sin. The left doesn't fear sin. They embrace it, but they're scared of the virus, which is carried by the right. So each side is quarantining against what the other side carries. One carries virus, one carries wickedness. And you could also compare the virus as sin to carbon, like the carbon footprint as original sin. And this would also tie into why the left believes in climate change, eschatology, rising sea levels because of the wickedness of fossil fuel consumption, the wickedness of your carbon footprint. But for the right, it's not Gaia that's going to flood us, it's God because of the wickedness of the sin embraced by the left. So this is, again, more of the bifurcation that I've been drawing attention to. I have been talking about this so long, and I decided, I have this book I'm working on called Lie World Order. But it's really for media skeptics who've already figured things out. This Lie World Order. I don't know how mainstreamable it is. So I took some of the best ideas in that, and I wrote it up as kind of a treatise, about 33 pages, and I called it Right. So I can just, describe for people explaining the split. So if you're anti-vax, you're woke right. If you're anti-DEI, you are woke right. If you're anti-immigration, that's a woke right position. If you scapegoat Jews, you're woke right. And people may not like that label because it's a pejorative, but if the tinfoil hat fits, wear it. Because that is what these positions represent. That's why I maintain you should not be anti. If you're anti, you're playing on the world stage. You're better off being anti-pro. Conscientious objection. If you're in the Psywar, you're part of the problem. At best, you're a propaganda mule, ignorantly carrying fear pills called red pills. At worst, you're an agent, an operative, or provocateur, maliciously manipulating people into a state of fear and paranoia. What difference does it make? So I published this book called Woke Right, Conservatism with a Victim Complex. None of the ideas in here will be a surprise to you if you've been listening to this channel, because I've been talking about this perfect political horseshoe, not just a political theory, but it's a model that has been implemented on the world stage. And you will find, and I put this in the book, overlaps. I've talked about the relationship between big government and the idea of closed versus open borders, or the porous skin, and how this relates left and right. So the same people who are all for closed borders are also for closed skin. Like, don't vax me, don't let anybody in, because it's blood purity. They don't want the purity of the nation being tainted. So you may think, the anti-immigrant narrative is separate from anti-vax. It's not. And the same parties support the same sides support the same attitudes. So again, if you're for closed borders, you're for closed skin, and you're also anti-alien, not illegal only, but extraterrestrial. There's a reason why Tucker Carlson said aliens are demons and one attacked him in his bed. There's a reason why Trump is behind Space Force. Space Force, border against the alien. The wall, build the wall, build the wall. Border against the illegal alien. Anti-vax, your skin as a border against incursions. Strong Second Amendment, protecting your home border. But now compare that with the left. The left is open borders. We love aliens. Beam us up, probe us. And they love the V. They poke us, big brother. And then they're like open doors. We will house immigrants. So one side is completely porous and in love with big government, and the other side is completely closed and anti-government. So these are pro and anti positions. Girl says 10 to 20 million illegals imported in 4 years, no problem. UK and Ireland overrun by immigrants, no problem. Yeah, I would argue that your attitude is the mirror of what the woke has in their perspective. Like it is quite literally a psyop to be worried about illegal immigrants, in my opinion. Well, actually, I think it's not just opinion. I mean, how many years have we been hearing this stuff? I've been hearing, the first time I heard about, we got 13 million illegal immigrants. We got 20 million illegal immigrants. I've been hearing this stuff repeated every election cycle, every single time. And I don't know how true that is. And it's notable that when Trump was shot, he was pointing at a sign saying, hey, look, we got 20 million illegals. That's when he was shot. And if you look at the prediction in Machete, Senator McLaughlin is saying these illegals are coming over. Let the terrorists come over when he gets shot. I'm saying it's a psyop, and that it's the white replacement theory is the basis of it. It's the globalism versus nationalism. The globalists want to erase all borders. So think about this. What happens if we have an alien invasion? We unite humanity against the alien or humanity with the alien, depending on whether we fight it or embrace it. Now, you'll notice the right wing's ready to fight aliens and left wants to embrace them. I'm talking about illegal aliens and extraterrestrials. Not a coincidence. Girl says, what me worry? Yeah, you know what? I would say this. If you're worried, you're paranoid. You're a victim of mind war. What I'm suggesting here is that if you're not experiencing the mind war, you're looked at as apathetic, like you don't care, like you're just not worried to the point of like you're actually just naively or blissfully ignorant. And I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if you're worried, you're a victim of the mind control. And I'm not like, okay, you're saying here sarcastically, I'd rather worry about movie scripts and esoteric symbols, more fun. No, I would say that we're more accurate than you are. You haven't predicted anything. You're not predicting patterns with regularity. And the fact that we regularly predict the fake news underscores everything I'm saying here. All of your fear and paranoia has amounted to nothing. All of the hours spent fretting over cirrus clouds and geoengineering, it's just as bad as environmentalists. So what I'm saying here is that no, if you perceive that you're in a state of duress and threat, it's because you're in the mind war. So I would suggest that you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and a victim of mind war, just as much as leftist wokies who can't sleep at night because their carbon footprint worries them are victims of mind war. I advocate here peace of mind, ataraxia, conscientious objection to the mind war. If you're in the mind war, you've lost the moral high ground and the intellectual high ground. So I don't know what you're trying to assert here. Like, I'm scareder than you are. I'm more terrified. I'm more agitated. It's like that's exactly what you've been spoon-fed. Fear, paranoia, and division. I don't fall for any of it. And then you're worried about immigrants. Well, you've just put yourself in a cluster of beliefs with the ethno-nationalism at the core of right-wing wokeism. And if you embrace that, you have to embrace everything else. You can't just be anti-Israel without being pretty much, and it's all a package deal, in favor of trad wives. So the sexism, the racism, the anti-Semitism, these are all clusters. These are things you cannot separate. But anyway, my point is, you're scared. I'm not. That doesn't give you the moral high ground. You're outraged. I'm not. That doesn't give you the moral high ground. I'm not going to look at these wokies lying on the street trying to stop people from getting to work because they're worried about their carbon footprints and they want to stop capitalism, stop oil, destroying paintings. I don't look at these people and say, hey, look, they're so full of rage. They're mad. They think the world's ending and they're fighting class war. I don't look at them as morally superior to me. I look at them as victims of the mind war. And I'm saying here that the position of the right-wing conspiracy theorist is woke. You're woke. That's fine. Wokeism, however, is a symptom of the madness. Cygirl says, join the Christian apocalyptics. They're not worried. They're focused on the afterlife. Well, let me add one more point to this, because I'm just trying to say here is that you don't have the intellectual or moral high ground just because you're enraged about these things. But moreover, the original skeptics under Pyrrho, the concept of suspending judgment led to, naturally, over time, it led to peace of mind, because you realized I was getting worked up over nothing consistently. So peace of mind is actually something that's desirable and attainable. And what's more is that it was, and this is not just the skeptics, but others, even the art of war talks about this, that the state of mind that you should be in when entering war isn't being rattled and paranoid and scared. You should be calm. I am calm. If things escalate, I'm not going to be the one losing my head, screaming and confused. I'm going to be the calmest person in the room. I'm the one you should follow. You shouldn't follow the people who can't keep their heads on straight. 6 weeks into the pandemic, Alex Jones was talking about eating his neighbors. You want to follow that? So no, I'm not triggered. And I just want to point out here, a side girl says he has nothing to worry about. It's called solipsism. No, let me correct you on that. It's called objectivism. I'm not acting emotionally. Your perspectives are purely based on your emotions. You're triggered. You're the solipsist, because your perspective is myopically filtered through media, and it doesn't account for the fakery. So you have been dragged into, conscripted into the mind war, but you've been dragged into the collective solipsism of MSM plus, of MSM, of mainstream mediation. So you are, by definition, a solipsist and a subjectivist and a paranoid conspiracy theorist. I'm not. And again, I'm just telling you, and not just you, but anybody who takes that perspective, if you're woke, you're a victim of mind war. And I'm not. It's that simple. Lord Laney says, can't both be true? A certain segment of the population demographics are certainly manipulated en masse for a Romanesque style of rule, but the elite also use the fear of changing demographics. This is the thing. When people were talking about conspiracies in the frame of it being false flags, it seemed like, okay, they're provoking something. They're building something up. Things are going to pop off. Eventually, it's going to go kinetic, and all this stuff's going to cost. It's like, no, it's not. It's never going to end. It's not going to end. Cygirl says, fear and paranoia are essential survival tools in a collapsing civilization. It's not collapsing. You're a doomsday prophet if you're saying the world's going to end. I encountered that the first time at a flat earth conference where Rick Hummer, who was like a preacher who had a crying problem, very emotional, he said, we're in the end times. And I laughed, and then I stopped. I'm like, oh, he's serious. Like, you're trying to tell me that we are in the end of days and everything's going to end? I've been hearing that for a long time, and I've studied cults for a long time. And I'm saying here that mainstream media is a cult with a built-in eschatology of climate change. But the conspiracy theorists and the woke have more intense collapse of civilization scenarios built into their heads. So you're not whatsoever in the end of days. You have no basis for saying so. Nukes are fake. I mean, that should have changed your worldview. If you realize nukes are fake and you're still terrified by the Wizard of Oz, this whole scenario, this illusion, that's on you. Cygirl says he aspires to be the Ayn Rand of auto hoaxers. Ayn Rand was never an objectivist. Ayn Rand espoused a form of philosophy, a psychoepistemology for assessing reality, sans subjectivism. getting rid of the assumption of mysticism, gods, and all this stuff, just going off the facts. There's nothing wrong with her operating system. The problem is that it was filtered through media. So the objectivists never attained objectivism. They were dragged into subjectivism like you. Conspiracy theorists are solipsists in a world of subjectivism. That's a fact. You think 5G towers are reading your mind and the clouds are making you sick? Yeah, you are a subjectivist and you've had a schizoid break from objective reality. Mainstream has had a minor schizoid affective break from reality, but it's more pronounced in the woke. It's pronounced in the woke left and the woke right. And I'm just pointing out here that I am not woke. And one more point here. You're not awake. The normies are asleep and they're dreaming, sure. But conspiracy theorists and wokeists, you're not awake. You're having a nightmare. You're still dreaming, but your dream sucks. Your dream is violent and scary. You think civilization's collapsing and you got to go tell everybody and warn everybody the sky's falling. And I'm saying, no, you're having a nightmare. I'm awake. That's why I'm calm. I can see the dream. I can see the nightmare. I can see the model. I see you in your Truman Show, terrified that it's going to all end. And I'm just out here from the off-world stage perspective. And I'm like, wait, this whole time I was falsely giving the moral and intellectual high ground to the most irate, agitated loudmouths out there, like Alex Jones, out there at Alex Jonestown, passing out that Kool-Aid. And he's like, it's all going to end. World War III, emergency broadcast, Civil War, emergency broadcast, assassination, always emergency. How's that not just blatant emotional manipulation? The media emotionally manipulates people. And the conspiracy media is far worse. Cygirl says, replacement is happening all over the West by design. Replacement theory is a hoax. The white genocide is a hoax. And the same people who are like, my genocide, my race, don't believe in the Holocaust. So it's like, okay, so you say that Holocaust is fake and you don't believe that they can do that, but you believe you're being Holocausted right now and you want me to take your Holocaust more seriously. And if you're claiming that you're being replaced and you don't have like 8 kids, I'm sorry, no sympathy here. Nick Fuentes, sorry, the guy's a 40-year-old virgin. He thinks women have cooties and he's talking about you guys are being replaced. It's like, I'm sorry, but you've had years. If you really cared about it, all these right-wing replacement theorists would have big families, and they don't. Bunch of incels. And they say, oh, the reason why we're involuntarily celibate is because the Jews influence culture and they got the women out of the kitchens and now they're in school and they're being subjected to leftism and DEI and all these antagonistic views towards the traditional values I want them to have. Because again, they're saying that this is the central split here. MAGA, Make America Great Again. Again is in when? What year was it great? Well, they're referring to great before feminism, before civil rights, before desegregation. That's what it really comes down to. If you look at the MAGA view, I mean, you could put on a MAGA hat and just like, I like Trump. He's my favorite TV show character. Sure. But you're also putting on a whole cluster of beliefs. It's not just the one thing. And progressive utopianism is on one side, and the traditional conservatism is on the other side. And I'm saying that these are both equally bad. Rico says, how many kids does Tim have? I'm curious. It's a good question. I could talk about my personal life later, possibly. But what I'll say is this, that the replacement theory stems from Nick Fuentes. They will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. If you remember that from it was kind of this slogan. He didn't invent it, I don't think, but the idea here of white genocide really got popularized then. These are not false equivalencies either. These are not false equivalencies. You can't point to any facts. You can only reference your own propaganda. So no, you're not being genocided. That's not happening. It's all a psyop. Anyway, I'm not here to do anything other than point out facts that are objective and verifiable. And what we have verified here is that the mainstream news is not objective. It's far from objective. The mainstream news is telling a story. And there may be instances where they're reporting facts like the weather, and even that's bent. I mean, it's all bent. Even if they're telling the truth, it all rests upon an edifice of lies, and it has a selective framing. So MSM lies by omission anyway. And it all asserts the validity of its own model, meaning every mainstream news story is framed as though what came before is true. So it's not aware of its own fallacious foundations. Girl's accusing me of being dishonest. Look, you're basically either one of two things. You're a victim of mind war and a propaganda mule, high on red pills. At least you're not hitting the Q pipe, but you're high on paranoia, and it gives you this false sense of moral superiority. Or you're an agent, a limited hangout operative, trying to prevent people from seeing how fake things are. If you're not focusing on fake, if you're still lost in the forest of fakery, it's just very questionable at the stage. So before you call me dishonest, I think I have a greater case to call you an agent, a provocateur, a fed. I mean, unless you're just a victim and you can't see through the propaganda. But I mean, I'm not trying to get ad hominem here, but you are. And if we're going to get to the point where we're going to attack the person speaking, then let's just be honest. A person defending mainstream narratives and alternative mainstream narratives is just questionable at best. All right, moving on. We're talking about the woke right. Okay, teen killer Carmelo Anthony allowed to graduate from high school while on bail for brutal stabbing. So again, they're putting this pairing here in front of us. He has his hand on his head and there's bricks behind him, very Masony. But this is outrage bait. And again, this was correlated by MSM sources with the Shiloh Hendricks scenario. Okay, we've got. Let me play this clip here. I don't know if the audio is going to play, so let me go ahead and reshare it. Give me a second. Observing reality says, what you said, Tim, was the ultimate key. Their lies rely solely on other lies from history. Yeah, that's what is really important here. People talk about the model of the world. It's like, shape is a really pointless question. We should be talking about worldview and how you get it, how you obtain your worldview, your model of the world. And our model of the world, our collective consensus shared version, is built upon the assumption that all the fake stuff is real. That's their base assumption. That's why I call it the MSM box. They operate, it's a closed system. It's actually a fictional universe. Let me play this short clip here. Someone tweeted this. They said, when you switch on the television,
everything is bad. It's just as terrible as you imagined and worse. With more, we go to Tom Lee Cruz. Tom Lee.
We're all in danger, Dan Lee.
Jesus Christ, what can we do?
Absolutely nothing.
It was good knowing you, Tom Lee.
I can't say the same.
That was unnecessary. We're just now getting in reports that all the children have exploded. They will be missed. Let's check in with Olivia Lee Rodrigo. Olivia Lee, where are you?
That's none of your business. Do you hear that? Cut the music. Do you hear that?
What do you hear?
That's the sound of us slowly dying.
I can hear it. It's louder in my left ear.
Olivia Lee Rodrigo.
I actually have some more questions for you. Okay, we're going to go to Kevin Lee, who has more with politics.
No, I don't.
Let's send it over to our senior correspondent, Nick Lee Minaj.
Look at this chart. Let's bring it up.
What am I looking at here?
I don't know, but it doesn't look good.
That looks bad.
Yeah, it's probably bad.
Let's go to our eye in the sky, Timothy Chalamet. Timothy.
Man, I am so high up right now.
You are in a helicopter.
I didn't know that when I got in. I thought it was hard.
Anyway, it's a parody news. Everything is bad. I thought I'd play it. That is how it works. It's a frame of reference. Say, Girl, talk about Mad Mike Hughes' stunts. I think you're just trying to get a little personal here, but it doesn't make a difference. Like, I'm not the IPS think tank. It's not one person's views. This is a body of researchers who've been observing steadfastly mainstream news, mainstream psyops, the alternative news, left and right, and the concurrent media in entertainment and in the celebrity sphere and in politics that all seems to reinforce what's happening on the world stage. And if you're not aware of psyops, you do not have an accurate version of the world. You've internalized a Truman Show. Girl says, let's rename this channel The Optimist. Why not? mean, do you think optimism is not justified? I mean, I just told you nukes are fake. And if that doesn't brighten your day a little bit, then you just have a very morose and dark disposition. It's actually good news. Nobody died at fill in the blank school shooting. And that's all of them. That's good news. I mean, at a minimum, it's less of a, I guess there's less of a case to be made here for pessimism if everything is fake in this sense. But we're trying to come to an understanding of the purpose to it, which I think I understand in a broad sense. Mass mind control, mass manipulation. What I am saying here is that the woke position is flawed. Your position is fundamentally flawed. You're not going to convince anybody here to go woke. You're not going to convince me to put on a sign that says, don't breathe the air, and then run out there and start flailing chemtrails. It's not going to happen. You're not going. That's black pill stuff. Yeah, black pill. Thank you, Ollie Goering. See, you've got red pill, which is like right-wing woke, but black pill is, yeah, all this stuff is bad and we can't change it. But black pill assumes this stuff is real. What we're offering here is like white pill. Like this stuff is fake. But a lot of people are so ideologically attached to their worldview and their scapegoat narratives and the people they hate that they can't let it go. It's purely egoic. You know, I talk about guardrails in the media, guardrail agents, guardrail narratives. Well, your ego itself is a guardrail. It's what Peter Carroll from the IoT, the Illuminati of Thanteros Chaos Magic group, called the psychic sensor. And this is a set of constraints on your worldview. Like it's an aperture that you've been given. And that filter, that myopic filter, keeps a lot of information out that would recontextualize everything. And the media gives us a very dark view. You've all seen that meme where it focuses on somebody stabbing somebody. But if you look further back and you see the actual shot outside of the viewfinder, you can see that the person doing the stabbing is actually the victim running and the other guy is doing the stabbing. And so you are living in denial if you're in the mainstream view or the MSM plus or the woke view. You're living in a alternate reality game. And so I'm not detached. I want to point out, Cygirl says a detached perspective. No, you're detached. You're the subjectivist here. You're detached from objective reality and you're triggered by propaganda. I'm detached emotionally at first because that's what skepticism entails. It says, do not attach yourself to every headline. Oh, this headline is scary. Let me react. How about you take the time to read it? How about you take the time to fact check it? If you attached yourself real time to the propaganda stream like everybody else does, you will be living on a roller coaster of emotions. You will think the world's ending. You will think civilization is collapsing, as you do. I don't. And if you were to pause for a moment and look back, how many times have you heard that World War III was imminent? Nukes were imminent. How many times did you react to these things before you knew it was fake? All of that time was wasted. All of that time was wasted in the mind war as a mind war casualty, unaware. This think tank is for war aware. So I'm saying here that I'm not detached. I have situational awareness. I would describe you as lost in the forest of fakery. And I have this short allegory I wrote. I put it on Kindle. And it's called The Forest of Fakery. So there's a group of people walking through a forest. And one of them points out, hey, look, there's a fake tree. He gathers everybody around it. And they spend a lot of time studying this fake tree. Another guy keeps wandering and he's like, well, these other ones are fake too. And what happens is the main character keeps distracting the party with big fake trees. Meanwhile, the others find out that they're all fake. And this is how it actually is. Every one of these psyops is pointed out as a fake tree, the big obvious ones. But the whole forest of fakery is being ignored. And the forest of fakery is the world stage. I'm not saying everything's fake. Nobody's saying that, but fake dominates. And if you're not Psywar aware, your perspectives are bent in favor of whatever the propagandist told you to believe. It's like being in a religious cult. And I've been studying stuff like, okay, geoengineering. I made this meme here of a plane with condensation trails, and then there's a silhouette of a child's head, and it says, "Your children are being poisoned. Stop geoengineering. Your silence is consent. Please retweet." I made this as a joke, ironically, and people are sharing it. It's so easy to manipulate people who have bought into a faulty premise that they're being poisoned by condensation trails. And this is an active measure. Like another point too, and I've been observing this for a long time. Chemtrail phobia is not grassroots. There's not like a lot of people in the world just scattered about noticing and like, hey, look at this. Have you noticed this too? And then it's come up into some kind of consensus. No, it's top down. Same thing with the climate change. These are top down propaganda narratives that are propagated, that are targeting people with fear, phobia, and scapegoating. And the anti-geoengineering is the same thing as the anti-carbon or the climate change. Intersection says, how do we know which volcanoes are real? Do I need to go sit on the rim and watch with my rose-colored glasses? I don't know what kind of straw man that is, but I'm the objectivist here. I really am. I think that there's a fundamental distinction being made here between knowers and believers. And what I have determined here, that the more I know, the more I recognize that I have questions, and faulty explanations or false narratives don't always have something to replace them. So you can debunk a lot of things you know to be fake, but it leaves you with a lot of unanswered questions. So if you're not comfortable not knowing everything, being a knower is difficult. Believers know everything. Oh, they're certain what they know. They're certain that what they believe is true. So believers and knowers are two different operating systems. MSM are believers. MSM plus, as in woke and conspiracy theorists, are believers. They're not knowers. There's a fundamental difference here. Intersection says, how do we know? Oh, no, wait, hold on. Do you think if you opposed white genocide, you'd be likely to see evidence of it, such as London's factual population replacement from white to non-white? I have to see the sources. The way these things are framed, I don't trust any of it. And I also would point out that the critical race theory is the idea that whites are oppressing the world, systemic oppression. That's just completely ignored by the people who think Jews control everything, and vice versa. So there's a lot of room here for subjective belief systems, selective interpretations, and I'm saying belief systems. You can come up with anything and believe in it, but when it comes to, do you know it to be true? Is this factual? That's the distinction here. So going off of what I've observed, no, I don't believe we're running out of people. Isn't that interesting that both sides agree that there's a population crisis? If you believe we're in a population crisis, then you're in the mind war. Left wing says there's too many people. Gaia is suffocating. The right wing says there's not enough people. We need to have more babies. And then I talk to the people, I ask the people, like Alsai Girl, for example. Okay, we'll probably believe that we're being depopulated because Jones has been repeating for 20 years. Bill Gates is going to depopulate us. We're being depopulated. Okay, fine. You're worried that we're running out of people, but then you're mad that you got 20 million immigrants. So I'm like, okay, well, so then what you're really saying is you want less non-white people. So it just comes down to race. And I'm not in their racial psi war. I don't take their racial prism. Psi Girl says, ideologues in the Anglo world are openly advocating white genocide using subtle language like diversity and inclusion. See, that's one of the big hoaxes. So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is how the right wing claims sexism and racism against themselves. It's right woke. It is white wokeism. It's right wing wokeism. So, for example, on the left, they'll say it's male dominated, white dominated, so I can't succeed. I'm a victim. Woe is me. They're not inclusive enough. I'm being excluded. And then the right will say they're being sexist and racist against white males, and they're excluding us. So both sides are victims of exclusion because of race and gender. But the right is fixated on male suppression. They're oppressed because they're males and white, and the left is they're oppressed because they're females and black. Is the dominant one. So I'm just saying that you're woke. Now, if you think that your wokeism is more valid than my objective media skepticism, we can debate that. But I'm saying that you don't have a higher moral or intellectual high ground than the leftist wokies. It's the same thing. Conspiracy theory infused truthervillism is wokeism. It's woke. It's an agitated, provocateur, highly propagandized worldview. It's a perspective that you live within. I mean, just the fact that they faked the Trump assassination attempt last year should totally disconnect you from the political horseshoe altogether. Cygirl says it's livestock management. See, I agree with that. It is livestock management. Absolutely. There is certainly a case to be made here that there is a power elite and there are the programmed masses. That we are programmed is not that is the only conspiracy. The only conspiracy that we can discern here is that there is a worldview monopoly that's tantamount to a monotheistic presence here. And that there is a separate society above that directs the masses. That is 100% true. Sawgirl says there's an obvious campaign against the family, the traditional family. This is something I've heard as well. And that's because the Jews got the women to leave the kitchen, so they're not having babies at 16, and they're getting educated, and they're getting jobs so they can pay taxes to Jews. Like that's the typical narrative of the incel, of the Nick Fuentes in his mother's basement, the 40-year-old virgin. Like the only reason I don't have a white trad wife and 8 babies is because we can't afford it, because of taxes, because of Israel. It's always a scapegoat. It's victim consciousness. All right, let's continue. Portal Complex said, I received a $340 ticket for not sorting through the recycling bin from some Gaia. Oh, yeah, you didn't. You put the wrong stuff in the wrong bin. Recycling is a huge fraud. And I also would consider it to be genuflection. You're going to go worship at the altar of the state. And esoterically speaking, their God is the God of death, rebirth, and recycling of souls. So recycling is a way of, in a sense, apologizing to the earth god. All right, let's continue. Observing Reality says, millennial and younger children are having tons of children. Gen Z had surprised me in a good way. Clump says, are there goth trad wives? Well, people, I see these things on Twitter. Like one guy's like, I don't see pregnant women anymore. Do you remember after 2021? And I'm not going to name names, but there are some people who said, okay, granted that there wasn't a Vaxageddon die-off, they've probably sterilized everybody. I don't see pregnant women anymore. So you don't see pregnant women, so you're saying there's no more babies? Like, go to the hospital. It's very easy to go viral saying that nobody's having kids anymore, but it's a little more difficult to go and check. But the trad wife thing is just a way of glorifying pre-feminist family structures. The idea of the man, the sole bread earner, and like this is idealizing the past. So this is an important contrast. Contrast the idealized past. We must go back to that again, to the progressive future. So again, progressive future, idealized past. This is a tug of war that's pro and anti. So if you're taking the side of the traditional past, you're an anti. The anti position is woke. The pro position is woke. These, by woke, I mean they exemplify the extremes in the bifurcated political spectrum. They believe in all this stuff. They're true believers. And I'm a non-believer. I don't believe that whites are being replaced. I don't believe that immigrants are the bad guy. I don't believe in the Vaxageddon scenarios. Like I'm a non-believer. And you know who hates non-believers? Cultists, religious people. The non-believers are hated more than believers of other faiths or the non-converted who might convert. But non-believers have always been hated. And the state religion right now is mass media. Media has replaced religion. It has supplanted it. Observing reality says men and women do have specialized roles, Tim. Yeah, sure. But you get to the gender stuff, and that's all very interesting as well to see how that stuff plays out. Because the left seems to be definitely anti-male, and then the right is like the left wants to regulate the male and grab their guns, and the right wants to regulate the female and prevent them from having abortions, take away the bodily autonomy, grab their wombs. So look at the gun grab and the womb grab. Left wants to grab the guns of the toxic males. The right wants to grab the wombs of the feminist toxic females. Once you can see that it's a game and that it's rigged, you can stop playing. Cygirl says, why not just say it? Anyone opposed to top-down social engineering is automatically stereotyped as MAGA. Well, I'm saying that if you adopt a belief system, you are that. So if you're saying, I choose this traditional idealized past, that this is what I will fight for, then you're MAGA. If you say, I want to get rid of the past, let's burn it down, let's start over, let's perfect mankind, let's just follow Klaus Schwab, then you're a progressive utopian. Like, we're going to perfect things on Mars, or whatever you think. You would be a progressive. And I'm saying, no, I'm anti-progressive, I'm anti-traditionalist, I'm anti-pro. But if you're taking the anti-side, you're in the war. That's all I'm saying. And have at it. Go fight your mind war. Stress yourself out. But I'm not going to be, treating mind war casualties with kid gloves just because they've been hardcore brainwashed. They Lie We See posted this. A smart person will change their view if new information contradicts their beliefs. An indoctrinated person lacks this ability. They are conditioned to dismiss facts. Now, this takes a little bit of insight because the mainstreamers believe that they're smart and conspiracy theorists are dumb. Conspiracy theorists believe they're smart and mainstreamers are dumb. The truth is, they're both dumb. The only smart people have stepped outside of the bifurcated war. AF Post says, despite being censored across streaming platforms, Ye's song Hail Hitler is viral on Instagram, TikTok, and X, amassing tens of millions of views. So here's your disease X. And this is just another example of how the mind war how they play these games. Like, why do we have the hardcore white nationalist, racist, anti-Semitic views being espoused by a black rapper? And if you look at the comments, the true neo-Nazi types don't like Ye, and they don't like rap. They see rap as a Jewish invention designed to destroy America. So they see this as degeneracy. And one of his songs, he talks about an inappropriate relationship he had with his cousin. And they say Hitler wouldn't approve of Ye. So it's just interesting that this is going viral. And this was the reason my other channel got censored. Think about that. I lose 2 weeks of monetization, my paycheck, because of Ye's meme got into one of my videos. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, look, I'm not in the mind war, so conscripted. I'm not a foot soldier in your mind war. I'm not going to be a propaganda mule. Yeah, if you're a propaganda mule and you're chasing some great awakening carrot, go for it. But if you're not getting paid for it, I just don't respect it. I respect crisis actors that get paid because, well, they're getting paid for their work. The people who are doing it for free, I just don't understand. Okay, I'm scrolling through my Twitter feed to make sure I haven't missed anything. We'll continue this conversation later. $1 million in PSYOP payouts. We talked about that. Okay, Rodney Hinton Jr.'s defense. Now check this out. It centers on his mental state at the time of the incident. So their argument for him is that he was suffering from mental illness after he saw the body camera footage of his kid being killed. So we can look forward to that. Carmelo Anthony, I don't think we'll see him in court until like September, so that's going to be kind of out of the story. The Tyler Butler story has enraged a lot of people. Oh, by the way, the chemtrail hoax book I put out, number 10 in 30-minute science and math short reads, and this is in the page section. I think it's up to number 2 now. So I'm going to follow up the chemtrail hoax, which again, this is just debunking something that a lot of mind war casualties still believe in. It confronts anti-geoengineering. And one of the things I really figured out in the last few weeks, and I really put it down in this book here, is that chemtrails is kind of a distraction or a mislabeling, because the chemtrail theorist isn't a theorist. They don't do any rigorous observations. No, they're actually just anti-geoengineering. That's what they are. And that matters. Geoengineering is predicated on the existence of climate change. So climate change is happening. We must geoengineer to fix. So to be anti-geoengineering is to accept the premise of climate change. So you already lost the rigged game if you're anti-geoengineering. That's why I'm saying anti-positions are garbage. These are losing. You're a loser in that position. If you're anti-geoengineering, you're just as much a loser as anybody who follows Greta. Just being objective here. But one of the things I realized is that the anti-geoengineering framing is the same frame as anti-vax, where they get both sides on the political horseshoe to agree that the bad thing is happening to the world, geoengineering or pandemic. But they get one side to agree to the government solution and to trust the government scientists, and they get the other side to reject the media and the government-approved solutions and to reject the cure. So they're anti the cure, whether it's the vax or the geoengineering. But both of these cures presuppose that the thing itself exists. So these are both controlled opposition points. But I'm going to follow up the chemtrail hoax, likely with the Mandela effect hoax, which should be an easy one. And I'll go down the line. The anti-vax hoax, any of these hoaxes that hold people in Trutherville. And look, if you're in Trutherville, you're a prisoner. You're basically a mind war prisoner, and we're going to free you at some point. I mean, you have to free yourself, but it's not going to be easy because you're in a closed system and the right information is not going to get to you. And you're surrounded by a bunch of paranoid, scared people who want to keep you in a state of fear. Because if you're in a state of fear, you can't think critically. If you're so scared of the clouds that you can't think straight, you're not going to figure out how it's a game on your mind to get you to accept logical fallacies. There are so many logical fallacies that they hardwire into these beliefs that it conditions you to be a bad thinker. If you fall for loaded questions, that's just sloppy thinking. And most of the conspiracy theories are the result of lazy thinking, and we're going to fix that. So I'll follow up chemtrail hoax with another one. Here's an example of the hysteria going around, and there's this channel, Take That Clouds, who pushes back against it. Here's an individual who couldn't go out of his house. He was scared to leave his house, locked up his kids in the basement, masks on them. And look, he says, look, over San Diego today, this is unacceptable. How can this be legal? This is a chemical stratospheric aerosol injection geoengineering. It's poison and it's unnatural. So here is this lady cowering in her basement, terrifying her children because of Bill Gates, and they're blocking the sun. She's coughing. Her eyes are watering. Her nose is running. They're all going to die. They can't breathe. They're saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. No, sorry. That's not from airplanes. That's not new. Clouds have been photographed. Here's one from 1935, 90 years ago. So were they doing geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injections in 1935? These clouds have a name. They have an explanation. There's a science to it. Rigorous observations reveal patterns. And one more point here, just so you all know, chemtrail people do not have a point. And I really close this coffin. I mean, the final nail was this: predictability. If you can't predict the next day that there's going to be chemtrails, then you can just abandon your model. You can abandon it because condensation trails are predictable. The Air Force has been using charts since the 50s because they want to make sure that their planes, which are, military aircraft, secret things, don't leave trails. And that's because the trails are a byproduct of climatic conditions. And so they can predict it with meteorology. It's that simple. But you cannot predict chemical trails. Cygirl says cloud seeding. No, cloud seeding is not what conspiracy theorists think. Cloud seeding is about as effective as... it's actually questionable if it's even effective. But I think it'd be more cost effective to just dump a bunch of water straight from a plane. And they do that. They scoop up the water and dump it because the cloud seeding just adds nuclei into existing clouds to intensify or increase the rain, but it's very subjective. I don't know if it's... But cloud seeding and condensation trails, that's apples and oranges. That's another logical fallacy. Oh, another logical fallacy. I'm glad that you're bringing these up. Cygirl just posted another logical fallacy for us. None of them would ever be deploying an aerosol. When we say, like, of course they wouldn't spray us with chemicals because they love us so much. That sarcastic way of representing my perspective is actually an appeal to motive fallacy. Like, the bad guys are so bad, of course they're doing bad things. Well, that's not an argument. So, just to put a final point on that, anti-geoengineering beliefs are the right-wing woke version of climate change hysterics. And I actually respect the climate change hysterics a little bit more. There's climate change hysterics gluing themselves onto airplanes because they believe in it so much. When was the last time you saw a chemtrail phobe doing anything other than complaining about it on Twitter? They don't even go outside and scream at the sky. If I believed in this stuff, you would see me in the streets with signs, with a bullhorn. I would be at airports. You would never see the enemy. If I believed in this stuff, I would be like the chemtrail Greta. Cygirl says, you do love them, don't you? Bodyguarding their science and human experimentation. So again, there's a couple of things in there. One, you're like, they are so bad, of course they'd be doing it. And then on that assumption, since I'm not against it, I'm therefore for it. I could say the same thing to you regarding, because you're not anti-climate change. I assume you don't believe in climate change. So therefore you hate Gaia. Why do you hate the whales, Cygirl? Why do you want polar bears to drown? What do you have against the ice caps? You must really hate nature. I guess you don't care about the world your grandchildren are going to grow up in. Guess you don't care. Money and profits over people, right? That's a gross misrepresentation of your views. Because you don't believe in Gretaism doesn't mean you hate the earth. And because I don't believe in anti-geoengineering hysteria doesn't mean that I believe that we should be doing experiments on people with aerosol injections. But that kind of fallacious thinking is what I'm pointing out here. If we eradicate the illogic and the unreason, get rid of belief systems, and focus on what we know as an operating system, applying a methodology to news consumption, we can arrive at the off-world stage, at peace of mind. And I appreciate the comments. I don't care about agreement. I'm not seeking agreement. There is going to be zero agreement between the off-world stage and the world stagers. We, the knowers out here, are not going to agree with the believers. At no point are the atheists going to say, okay, yeah, you Mormons have a point. All those golden tablets and the angels, yeah, you've got a point. No, they're not going to ever make that concession. I am never going to make a concession that you have a point. Portal says they won't spray chemicals because they walk amongst us. Yeah, I'd also advise against using the word spray in this context. Because let's just pretend it's real for a minute. the volume of content that goes into the trails couldn't possibly fit in one airplane. Look at your average contrail or chemical trail. So you got this chemical trail. How much chemtrail juice went into that? Because those trails go for hundreds of miles. Like what kind of substance is being mixed in to create this quote spray? It's not a spray. That's just a misuse of the word spray. There is no spray, chemical or otherwise, that could fit in a plane to create that volume of a trail for that many miles. The only explanation is the hot air reacting with rarefied high altitude air. That's the only explanation that makes logical sense. Rico Suave says they live underground. Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, I imagine that would be the case. Like, that could make sense. That would be the only thing that makes sense. But no, there is no spray. Girl says RFK Jr. insists it's in the fuel. He also invoked DARPA. RFK Jr. is an ignoramus, a manipulator, a propagandist, and he's pandering. And it's kind of funny how for 4 years, RFK Jr.'s fans were waiting for JFK to come back. And then JFK Jr., and he had all kinds of groupies, and he had all these opportunists like Vincent Fuchsia and Negative 48 who took advantage of the groupies. Yeah, I'm JFK Jr. Imagine having a bunch of JFK Jr. fans fawning over you. It turned these guys into rock stars. Negative 48 was motorcycle racing when he died, sadly, a couple years ago. But before he died, he had so many women eating out of the palms of his hand because they thought he was JFK Jr. in an ugly fat suit. And he probably never even took the suit off. My point being, they never got their Kennedy hero until RFK shows up. And he's like, okay, how is he going to fill in those shoes? But somehow he did. But no, the chemtrail thing it's an absurdity. We've already debunked it. It's alternative media claptrap wokeism. And the reason I put that book out, Right-Wing Woke, is because these are things we already talk about. It's part of this infrastructure of mass belief. There's a structure here to the world stage, the mental infrastructure. And we nailed that one. But we're moving on from it. If you truly believed in it, you'd be wearing a mask by now. So it's not like anybody who believes in it takes it seriously. It's an unserious proposition. Like, you're not serious. Come on. I'm serious about what I'm doing. This is all I do. But those who claim to believe all these terrible things, you're not serious because you're not doing squat. You're sitting on your couch. You're talking about online, but there's no tangible activism. If I really believed, I could lead the way with real activism. I don't see any real activism. So it's all talk. Wokeism is all talk, left and right. Here's a screen cap from the upcoming film, Final Destination, which I'll be watching in 2 days. And there's your explosion. Powerful imagery. I'm going to see it the morning it comes out. Intersection says the word debunk shows up a lot. What does it mean? It means discredited. For example, cows being mutilated by aliens has been debunked. Do you understand what that means? Like, it's not a question. Cows are not being mutilated by aliens. You know what does it? Coyotes. My friend's cat was, I'm not going to say eaten entirely, but a coyote got it. So I go outside, find the cat. Well, the neighbor found it, and I took care of it for them. And the cat was fine from the outside, but its entire digestive tract had just been eaten, like its guts were eaten. Like its belly, the soft belly tissue was just slit and it was just cleaned out. And I thought, okay, that's strange. Well, I called animal control and they explained to me that these coyotes come down from the foothills. They can jump over fences that are 6 feet. And if you have small cats and dogs, don't leave them out because the coyotes, they're not going for the meat. They're just going for they eat the guts. And the same thing with cows. So they'll go walk under a cow. So anyway, we talked about this. He said, no, these cattle mutilations are from coyotes. So chemtrails have been debunked. And the model thing is that you don't have a leg to stand on if you can't predict them. Because when you're talking about science or methodology and observational data, you arrive at the ability to predict things. That's what science is good for. You can predict the outcome of actions, or you can predict the future. It's very useful. And in this case, there are methodologies to predict when you're going to see persistent trails. And this is solely based on looking at the environment, looking at the atmosphere, weather conditions. So if I can predict condensation trails, but you cannot predict chemical trails, then there's something wrong with your model. Unless your argument shifts to, well, they only spray chemtrails under certain atmospheric conditions at certain altitudes that happen to correspond with the exact conditions that are conducive to persistent chemtrails or contrails. So in other words, the predictability of my model makes my model valid. The unpredictability of the paranoid take means that you don't have anything to stand on. Intersection says, how can you predict what days chemtrails are going to be used? You can't. You can't, unless you are working for the bad guys doing it. But the fact that condensation trails, which you mislabel as chemtrails, are predictable debunks your position. So what you can say unequivocally here is that chemtrails do not exist. They are a mislabeling of a well-understood phenomenon called condensation trails. It's a word game, but you've been lied to, you've been manipulated by propagandists who've used logical fallacies to shoehorn bad ideas into your head. They're not good ideas. And it's not simply that they're wrong, but that you've arrived at them with bad evidence. Because if they were real, you would have real evidence to substantiate it, and you have none. HG said some of those cattle mutilations had very laser precision injuries. Well, let me add one final point to the alien thing, because this is another fact. And there's a huge community of UFO believers, ufologists, and all that. People only believe in aliens for one reason: government operatives running psyops. There's a documentary, 60 Years of Deception inside the US's government UFO manipulation program. If you haven't seen Mirage Men, I'll put a link in the chat. All of the stories about UFO abductions, underground bases, cattle mutilation, that all came from right here, a couple miles behind me here at the Kirtland Air Force Base. The Air Force sent special agents to the various conspiracy theorists online to get them to believe in ridiculous things like alien abductions. They contacted these people talking about the stuff, and they gave them a bunch of misinformation. That's a fact. Look up Mirage Men. So if you believe in UFOs and aliens, alien abductions, like on X-Files, your sole basis is the special forces in the Air Force. So special agents made this stuff up. UFO mythology is a government construct. I mean, I say aliens is a angel for the atheist, like it's a counterpart for this new religious paradigm. Yeah, absolutely. But the entire basis for this ufology is disinformation, provable disinformation. Cygirl says they'll never geoengineer your neighborhood. Relax. Cygirl, they'll never climate change will never hit your neighborhood, so relax. Your carbon footprint is not going to come back and hit you, so relax. You see, you're advancing a position that is the twin of the Greta position, the Al Gore position. And ironically, you probably think Al Gore is full of it. Al Gore Leone and the Environmental Protectionist Agency. It's a racket. So you know Greta's a hoax, that she's a propagandist. You know Al Gore is hyping up a non-existent threat of CO2. Yet, you've adopted an analogous, parallel, identical belief system. It's the same thing. It's a mirror. And I'm just pointing this out again, because this is the state of mind of a victim of the mind war. Whether you're a fanatic or a chemtrail geoengineering fanatic, you are definitely a victim here. And my condolences. Yeah, now I'm curious, did RFK Jr. check for fluoride in the water before he I don't think he would have gone up to this creek here. He says Mother's Day hike in Dumbarton Oaks Park with his grandchildren. And there is RFK submerged in sewage. Quote, swimming in Rock Creek is dangerous and prohibited by the National Park Service as the creek contains dangerously high bacteria levels. But yeah, again, he probably made sure that it didn't have fluoride in it. Cygirl says, conflate human experimentation with ufology. Well, absolutely. I would argue here that the same that are responsible for the mass belief in UFOs and that hysteria, that disinformation, I would argue the same disinformation agents are behind the chemtrail stuff. Look, anti-geoengineering rests on the same premise, an identical premise as climate change. So if you don't believe in climate change, if you don't support Greta and you're looked at as immoral, reckless, and you don't care about the environment. And the argument that you're bringing up here that I don't care because it's not affecting me, yeah, that's basically a Gretaism. It's fear-based propaganda. I don't have a lot of patience for. I study the propaganda. I just recognize it for what it is. All right, this is Chief Crow. Auto Hoaxer GTFO will be hopefully live tonight. And I have a big announcement. The PSYOP trading cards are going into production. And I will be setting up the pre-order listings this evening for anybody who wants to get a full pack. And I think we're aiming for 33, just to have a nice rounded number there. Here is Chief Crow. Have a great